On the morning of August 24th, 79 AD, Pompeii was just a town. Not a ruin, not a museum, just a town. 20,000 people waking up, stretching, arguing about money, burning their breakfast. The bakeries on Via dell'Abbondanza were already open. You could smell the bread from 3 streets away. A man named Modestus, we know his name because it was carved above his oven, was pulling out the first batch of round loaves. Those same loaves would be found, carbonized but perfectly shaped, 2,000 years later. In the Forum, merchants were setting up stalls. A politician's slogan was freshly painted on a wall. "Vote for Helvius Sabinus! Even the petty thieves support him." That's a real inscription. Someone wrote that on a wall in a city that had 3 weeks left to exist. 30 kilometers across the bay, at the port of Misenum, a man named Gaius Plinius Secundus was having a quiet morning. You know him as Pliny the Elder. 55, overweight, asthmatic, commander of the Roman imperial fleet, and the greatest naturalist of the ancient world. A man who had written 37 volumes cataloging everything from earthquakes to elephant behavior. That morning, he was reading. He was always reading. His nephew, 17-year-old Pliny the Younger, later wrote that his uncle considered any moment not spent studying to be wasted. The sky was clear. Vesuvius stood green and quiet in the distance, covered in vineyards. No one called it a volcano. That word didn't exist yet in Latin. There had been earthquakes for days, small ones. But this was Campania. The ground always shook. 17 years earlier, a massive earthquake had damaged half the city. They rebuilt. They always rebuilt. So on that morning, no one was afraid. They should have been. It started just after midday. Pliny the Younger was studying. His uncle was sunbathing after a cold bath and lunch. A normal afternoon for a man who slept 3 hours a night. Then his uncle's wife pointed at the sky. A cloud shot up from Vesuvius like a pillar, straight, impossibly tall, then spreading at the top like the branches of a pine tree. Pliny the Younger would describe it in a letter to the historian Tacitus. That description is so precise that today this type of eruption is called a Plinian eruption, named after a teenager's letter. The column rose 33 kilometers into the sky, higher than commercial airplanes fly. At first it was white, superheated steam and gas. Then it turned dark as rock and ash mixed in. The column was punching through the atmosphere, carrying billions of tons of pulverized stone. In Pompeii, people stopped and looked up. Some ran immediately, the smart ones. They grabbed what they could and headed for the gates. Most stayed. They had businesses, homes, relatives who couldn't walk. They thought it would pass. By 2 in the afternoon, it was raining rocks. Pumice stones, lightweight, porous, white-gray, fell on Pompeii like hail, each the size of a walnut. They bounced off roofs, rolled down streets, piled up in corners. At first it seemed manageable. People covered their heads with pillows, but the stones didn't stop. By 3, 15 centimeters deep. By 4, 30. By 5, half a meter. The streets were disappearing. The stones got heavier and darker. Roofs cracked, then collapsed. The first deaths weren't from fire or gas. They were from ceilings falling on people who stayed indoors. The sky turned completely black, not evening dark, a darkness Pliny the Younger described as not like a moonless night, but like a sealed room with the lamp blown out. The only light came from Vesuvius, flashes of fire inside the column like lightning in a thunderstorm, and from fires across the city as oil lamps tipped and wooden beams caught flame. Across the bay, Pliny the Elder made a decision that would kill him. He had been watching with scientific curiosity, taking notes, dictating observations. Then a message arrived from a woman named Rectina, living at the base of Vesuvius, begging for rescue. No escape by land, the roads were buried. Pliny ordered the fleet launched. Not one ship, the fleet. He turned the imperial navy into a rescue mission. His nephew refused to go. He said he wanted to keep studying. Years later, There's a quiet guilt in how he tells this part. Pliny sailed directly toward Vesuvius. Hot ash and burning rock began falling on the decks. The helmsman urged him to turn back. "Fortune favors the brave," Pliny said. "Take me to Pomponianus." That's a real quote. Pomponianus was a friend in Stabia, south of Pompeii. When Pliny arrived, the wind was wrong. They couldn't sail out. So Pliny did something remarkable. He took a bath, had dinner, went to sleep. His snoring could be heard through the door. Around him, the world was ending. And the old naturalist took a nap. By midnight, the pumice in Pompeii was 3 meters deep. The ground floor of every building was buried. People still alive were trapped on upper floors, breathing through wet cloths, listening to the endless drumming of stones above. The sea had pulled back, hundreds of meters of seabed exposed, fish flopping in the dark. Some people ran across the exposed seabed toward boats. We know because their bodies were found there. In Stabii, the courtyard of Pomponianus's villa was filling so fast that doorways were getting blocked. They woke Pliny. If they didn't leave now, they'd be trapped. Pliny got up, calm. They tied pillows to their heads with cloth strips and walked out into the darkness. At approximately 6:30 on the morning of August 25th, the eruption column collapsed. When a volcanic column collapses, the material rolls outward, a superheated avalanche of gas, ash, and rock called a pyroclastic surge. 700 kilometers per hour, 300 to 700 degrees. The first surge hit Herculaneum. It killed everyone still there in 4 seconds. The heat was so intense that brains boiled and skulls exploded. 300 skeletons were found in the boathouses by the harbor, huddled together, holding each other, waiting for rescue that never came. The first surge didn't reach Pompeii. The second reached the walls. The third entered the city. Everyone still there died in seconds. The plaster casts in museums, those hollow shapes of human bodies, show people in their exact final positions. A mother bent over her child, a man with hands over his face, a dog on its chain. One heartbeat alive, the next, plaster casts waiting to be discovered. On the beach at Stabii, Pliny the Elder sat down on a rock. He asked for cold water, drank it, asked for more. The air was thick with sulfur. Others covered their faces. Pliny struggled, overweight, asthmatic, volcanic gases filling his lungs. He stood, leaning on 2 slaves. Then he collapsed onto the sand. His nephew later wrote, "When daylight returned 2 days after, his body was found intact, uninjured, still clothed, looking more like a man sleeping than a man dead." He sailed toward the eruption while everyone else sailed away. The volcano took him for it. At Misenum, Pliny the Younger survived. He and his mother fled through streets choked with ash, in darkness so complete they could hear screaming but see nothing. His mother begged him to leave her behind. She was slowing him down. He refused. He took her hand and made her walk. The ash fell for 2 more days. When it stopped, where Pompeii had been, there was nothing. A flat, gray desert, 6 meters of ash. The survivors couldn't find where the city had been. Over the decades, its location was forgotten. For 1,700 years, 20,000 lives lay buried under a vineyard. In 1748, a Spanish engineer sank a shaft and found a painted wall. Pompeii came back, not as a city, as a time capsule. The bread in Modestus's oven, the slogans on the walls, the dog on its chain. Graffiti in a tavern. "I don't want to sell my husband, not for all the gold in the world." Everything frozen, everything waiting. Pliny the Younger lived to 61. He became a senator, a governor. But the 2 letters he wrote to Tacitus, describing the eruption, his uncle's death, those survived 2,000 years. He was 17 when Vesuvius erupted. For the rest of his life, he carried the memory of a sky that turned black, a sea that pulled away, and an uncle who sailed toward the fire because he wanted to understand it. He never went back. No one did. Not for 1,700 years. The city is still being excavated today. A third of Pompeii remains buried. We don't know what's there, but we know someone is.